there's a couple of things, as far as a debate topic, as far as to reach out to all these people that are defending Crowder. Crowder, the first time that I think I first became aware of him probably was when Vox went after him, and I was basically on Vox's side pretty much, completely. You may think that that's dumb, that I'm dumb for being completely on Vox's side. I don't care, though. That Vox went after them. I've always adored, what they do and their stuff. But I wanted to respond to something that I've rolled my eyes at for a very long time. I used to have a very close friend, Brandon, who basically told me, and I mean, Christians can be like talking to a brick wall about these topics, sometimes about the gay, um, the gay gene thing and this whole concept. See, people are trying to figure out and answer the question ultimately, what is it that causes a person to be gay? I think is the question that they're trying to look and answer. And people like me have at first been very inclined to look at the the nature side of the question. Is there something that's different about these people's nature than mine, for instance? Because like I am, like even though I don't want to be a boy in the current form, biologically speaking, strictly, I am a boy, and I am attracted to women pretty much exclusively as far as sexuality is concerned. So strictly speaking, if we're just speaking about biology and not really like how I feel gender wise, then I'm heterosexual, you know? And um so I can't really I his nature is different than mine. I mean, I get that. And you ask why, essentially, what is it that causes a person that to diverge ultimately in that direction? And the thing is that that debate has been one in which conservatives have sought, for the longest time to define and to deflect, ultimately as being on the they've done everything they can to push it onto the nature side of things, but there's this big thing, and I'm gonna have to open up with you as an American, and this may offend American sentiments. Now, there may be a lot of Americans, and if this is gonna be triggering for you, for me to actually tell you how I feel, okay, in this, so brace yourself if you really want to hear what I have to say. I would not have chosen to be born here if it were possible to choose where I wanted to be born. I would not be an American citizen if those things were possible. So it would follow in my mind that since I wasn't up in some pre existing space telling my parents to, fuck in America, that a child is not able to select the environment that a child is born into any more than a child that turns out to be gay is able to choose the environment that they were raised under. So it doesn't really seem to me like you really score points in arguing that it's a lifestyle choice by making it about their environment. Something must have, if you make it on the environment side, then you can only attribute it to something weird going on where there was sexual abuse going on that pushed them in that direction, and that was not something that was ultimately their fault. I don't think though that it doesn't really make sense. It doesn't really square with my experience of the people that happen to be homosexual that I've been aware of and have known personally. These people were not necessarily the people they would absolutely testify that they were not abused as kids. That was not what was happening. It was genetic. I mean, they were pretty adamant about it being genetic. And the conservatives, they've tried to deny that. They've tried to do everything they can to deny it. And my whole response was to basically pull back and say, look, I don't give a shit whether it's nature or nurture. It doesn't really excuse giving people, taking away a right of a person to be what they are and to have the same rights that I do for a trait that they cannot control. There's no justification or excuse for that kind of bullshit. And, looking in it and looking at some of these fuckboy trash human beings that have actually defended Crowder for what he said about Carlos and for all the things that he had to say about Carlos, you know, uh, they're all trash. And I mean, when I say fuckboy, I am talking about Senator Cruz, by the way. I am talking about Ben Shapiro, by the way. I consider these people fuckboys and absolutely guilty of being fuckboys. So, fuckboy Shapiro and fuckboy Crowder and fuckboy Cruz, you know, not really a senator. He's not going to get that respect from me because he's a piece of shit. Uh, like let's look into, basically the Wikipedia about Steven Crowder, so you can get what I really feel about all this up front. You know, by the way, Canada, please apologize for his immigration here. Stephen Crowder is the very type of Canadian citizen who came here because he preferred our country to his. And what I want to say about Canadian immigrants is that the kind of people that come over from Canada tend to be the people that feel that their country is too left wing. If I could change the laws in this country, I would make one change that I would say is that I would deny citizenship in America for Canadian immigrants that were not didn't have patriotic sentiments towards Canada. Yep, that's right. The people that don't like Canada that want to come here instead, I don't want them in America. If you don't like your country up there in Canada, I don't want you here either. That's how I feel about it because that particular situation and those particular defections have tended to be people like Steven Crowder, who I feel enraged came here in the first place. I would like to send him back to Canada. You can have Crowder. We don't want him. You're going to find out real quick that I've been a person that's been on the far left for a very long time as I start beginning to analyze all this. Like, this is just absolutely disgusting. I don't mind being quote unquote radical. you know, I just don't. It's not something that really has ever really bothered me. They can call me a radical. Oh no, the radicals. And so basically, he's a homophobe. He's a homophobic piece of shit, and I'm enraged that in August they remonetized his channel here at YouTube. Uh, Wojak, please demonetize him and keep him demonetized. So, what was I ultimately looking for this? The investigation. So this is the kind of behavior that he did. So Ted Cruz defended him. He basically said a bunch of crappy. He did criticize the decision to demonetize him. Even though he had engaged in a pattern of egregious behaviors that really had engaged and persecuted Carlos Maza, and he tries to defend it on the basis that it's a comedy show. Steven Crowder is painfully unfunny. I mean, this is one of the things that has ultimately been like the most um frustrating is that I guess I could say that I ultimately don't find the Daily Show all that funny anymore. It was funny under Jon Stewart, but Trevor Noah is stars and bars more funny than Steven Crowder ever was. I mean, like that's like as far as comedians go, like that's you want to know like a comedian that I really adore, David Cross. Totally adore David Cross. It would be like total approval of pretty much almost everything that he's ever joked about. There's very little that I could actually say that I against Cross because against David Cross because I basically agree with his perspective to a huge extent, even though he would probably find my music pretty he would not want to be associated with the bands that I like. He would be too embarrassed to be. I know, I know, I understand that. I wouldn't try, engaging with him about music. I wouldn't be like, hey Cross, you want to go see Bewitched live or something like that. No, I get he wouldn't want to be into the music that I am, but yeah, I really like the guy. But oh God, let me like look at this all. YouTube basically remonetized him even after all that crap, and I basically was completely in solidarity with Fox, and I've always been completely disgusted by the fuck the fucking debate that conservatives are trying to have about homosexuality. Like I feel that it is fundamentally unjust to discriminate against a person for a trait that they could not control, and I don't think that it lends any credibility to the perspective that they or it doesn't merit any points for them if they try to say ultimately that it's the nurture side of the equation, because I did not choose to be born in America, therefore Carlos could not possibly have chosen to have the environment that he was born into. That if that was what made him gay, it doesn't excuse discrimination against him. You know, that's my position. And I don't think you're going to really do a good job of actually debating me if you actually get into a debate with me, because I will destroy you, Crowder, for actually defending him. Especially if we have it where I can actually do research and the flow of the moment while I'm attacking you. You know, if I have access to information. Also, Stephen Crowder suggested that the coronavirus death totals were inflated, accusing leftists at hospitals of labeling unrelated deaths as caused by COVID 19. At the same time, experts said the coronavirus case numbers were not likely undercounted, not overcounted. Crowder was among the conservative pundits who shared a Medium blog titled COVID 19 Evidence Over Hysteria by Aaron Jin, a product manager, who argued against the severity of the coronavirus pandemic. However, experts and epidemiologists debunked the blog post, and Medium did the right thing and ultimately took it down. Now, Crowder has had a tendency to basically minimize the severity of the coronavirus, which has been a bad thing to do, and I can't believe a woman married this guy. He's a real, like, this selection was probably largely because Steven Crowder has money. I mean that, like, purely. I don't think that a woman would marry that guy for anything other than money. That's what I think. I think his like he's repulsive. Becca Lewis, a Stanford researcher studies extremism on YouTube, said in a Bloomberg article that while Crowder stays away from expressing white nationalism directly, his channel has some of the most overt racism of the shows that I've ever looked at. Francesca Tripoli, a sociologist at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, said that Crowder is, quote, very popular, especially among young conservative voters. Well, I'm young, and like most young people, I find conservatives repulsive. And I can speak for my generation in that you might not want to believe it, but I am incredibly representative of my generation in having a disdain for conservatism. You know, oh, and he wrote about the benefits of remaining abstinent prior to his marriage. The way that I feel about abstinence before marriage, ultimately as a concept, is it's a bad idea. Why do I feel that way? Because you want to know if you're sexually compatible with the person you marry. Real simple. You wouldn't want to get into a long term commitment with somebody without having that question answered. So that's not like there's not a perk. There's no perks to it. It's just a downside all the way. There's no upside, all downside. That's how I feel. Really. I mean, I wouldn't want to put a ring on somebody unless I knew that we were actually sexually compatible in the bedroom. You know? So, I think it's fair to say that in all likelihood, me and Crowder have a completely different taste in women than and I wouldn't be entirely surprised if the girls I like looked and did absolutely nothing like who he's into. But because like perspective wise, I have not come at this from an ultimately like a right wing angle. I've never really been a member of the right. I've always like my progression politically was like at 13 I was enchanted by Ralph Nader. I started as what in the United States is basically has been referred to ultimately as fringe left, even though to me that isn't really a fringe left. Like the way that I feel about it is more of an internationalist perspective. I mean, like I know more about what's going on all over the world, and I know that from my perspective, since it's been expanded to knowing a lot about everything that's happening everywhere, that if you were to judge America by like ultimately international standards, it's a far right country, and we have one party that is ultimately far right and one that's like kind of moderate right. The Democrats would be considered a far right party in almost all of Europe. They would be considered radicals that are completely out of touch with the population as well, and the Republicans would be seen as outright neo Nazis. In anywhere else but America, and this is not something that is good about America. It's one of the worst aspects about America. It's an ultimate slap to the face of my American pride that our citizenry is so dumb and so propagandized that it can't ultimately see reality for what it really is. You know, this is the truth. And I would come across as arrogant to most Americans because when you're right about something in this country, and you're asserting ultimately that that other people in that many people in this country think a different way about something, but that your angle on reality is more valid than theirs. And you have that attitude, they will perceive you very not like pompous and arrogant, conceited. Would be the way that they will come after you. But I would just say that I don't think that any of those points of criticism are ultimately true. At the end of the day, I don't really think of myself as really all that significant of a person at all. And I just know that I see things in reality, see things that are happening in reality more like, accurately than most Americans happen to perceive reality. And that's not an arrogant point of view. It's just I see reality more clearly than most people tend to. And people are ultimately absolutely enthralled with Steven Crowder. He does bait videos like this. Male privilege is a myth. Change my mind. Here, let me talk about a male privilege that I will assert that I have in response to Steven Crowder. It I am a child-free male. I am interested in child-free women. Have you ever seen a video by Christina Rads, about the child-free movement? Look into it. She basically says, ultimately about all the bigotry and hatred that she happens to get for her decision not to have kids. Do you know how much hate I get when I say I don't want kids? It's usually for the most part, cool, fine, don't have them. Different strokes for different folks. But they tear into women. A woman doesn't have a right to be child free, but I do. You know, that's that's how people basically perceive it, and that is male privilege. That is a male privilege. I don't get nearly as much harassment for it as a woman would. So I have privilege. And Crowder might not be convinced by that argument, but it's pretty rock solid. I don't think that anybody can ultimately change Crowder's mind because he's already basically made his mind up about all these positions. I just know that and the thing is that I'm ultimately just speaking from private experience here. I mean, like I know this. I know that girls that are child free get a lot of shit for it, whereas me, it's just almost nothing. Nobody really goes after you that hard. They're just like, oh, cool, use a condom, or if you're still interested in women, or use really good birth control. That's all they really say to you. Like that's like the most that you'd get in terms of criticism. And you might be pressured to get a vasectomy ultimately. That may be what they would say, but you wouldn't get nearly the kinds of shit that you get for women that women get. I mean, people, the level of bigotry that women have to suffer from, she testified was even worse than openly identifying as an atheist. So it started basically. My disdain for Crowder, though, basically started back in December of 2012. In December of 2012, Crowders and members of American for Prosperity were all involved in an altercation at a demonstration in Michigan concerning the state's recently passed right to work law, which, by the way, I'm against right to work laws because they're inaccurately framed. It's basically the right to work for less. That's all they really mean. They're only eroding union rights. That's all that particular piece of crap legislation ultimately achieves. And the incident began with an attempt by union advocates to tear down the Americans for Prosperity tent, which was eventually successful. During the altercation, Carter was punched several times by a union activist, and then he posted an edited video to his YouTube footage that cut footage of the alleged assaultant being pushed to the ground and getting back up right before throwing punches at Crowder. However, Fox News broadcast of the incident, including footage of the man being pushed, you know, included footage of the man being pushed. The New York Times says the same footage shows that Crowder had his hand on the man's shoulder just before he tumbled to the ground, but where the camera does not capture the whole sequence of events, it seems likely that the man was knocked to the ground as members of the two sides pushed against one against together, not shoved down by Mr. Crowder. Crowder was really released an unedited copy of the video. The big thing that I would ultimately like to say about Steven Crowder too is that Steven Crowder has a whole crew ultimately that will edit his videos for him because of the fact that you idiots have basically made him incredibly popular here on YouTube. You love Steven. You've given him a wide audience, and now he has made a ton of money. This is what I mean when I say that YouTube really, and the kids that I grew up with basically convinced me very strongly that we weren't living in a just world. I'm not surprised an idiot is able to climb that high on the social ladder of YouTube. Onisan got away with a lot of shit for a long time, and I imagine Crowder will too, because a lot of people are too dumb to actually engage in critical thinking, and especially conservatives. Like they don't have a critical thinking brain. They don't have a brain that will crunch anything really. And this is what I mean. Ultimately, there are people. The people on their side of the aisle don't do any critical thinking. They fall in line. Our side is actually thinking. And looking at Crowder and his record ultimately, politically conservative media, and you'll basically say that I'm projecting onto all of this my own views. But ick, yuck, pajamas, yuck. Oh, and he's got associations with Breitbart, yuck. So he's got, the guys that are behind this guy are people that I find disgusting human beings as well. Crowder served as a master of ceremonies for the Conservative Political Action Conference. What I would say about CPAC is that I would probably rather go swimming out in the ocean than attend to it and get bitten by a shark than even show up the Conservative Political Action Conference at CPAC. I would not be caught dead at a place like that. In October, YouTube video parodying Lena Dunham's ad endorsing Lena Dunham mentioned in the like if I would not like I would be humiliated if anybody were ever able to take a photo of me and they were able to show that I had ever attended CPAC. Like I would not be able to defend that. It and good that I wouldn't be able to. So Crowder, created a short video for the conservative website PragerU. By the way, regarding PragerU, I'm in solidarity with the new work being put forward by our former I forget the Gravel Institute. I'm completely supportive for the Gravel Institute to destroy PragerU. We're up against them, completely cooperating with PragerU, not with PragerU, but with the the Gravel Institute. We're a complete endorsement of this particular engaging in World War III, ultimately against PragerU. I find PragerU videos to be incredibly toxic. They have failed to convince me of much of anything, but that's because I'm actually a free thinker. Whereas they want to frame me as indoctrinated. But if I'm indoctrinated, do you see what I'm doing to myself right here in the moment? Who's indoctrinating who? Who's indoctrinating me? Wikipedia? As I dig through information to attack Crowder, as I engage in critical thinking, as I tell you my thoughts about queer people and ultimately how this stupid, pathetic attempt to excuse, you know, a discrimination against them on the bullshit notion that it is a lifestyle decision is not really getting very far with people like me because I did not choose to be born in America. I didn't get to exist as a spirit in spirit form up there in space and influence my parents to fuck in America. That I didn't get that, and therefore a child cannot choose its parents. A child cannot choose the environment that it grows up in, and therefore, because of that, if the environment were to make a child gay, then the environment in no way, shape, or form is something that they can control, and if it did that and it resulted in that, consequentially, as a result of that, then ultimately it was not a choice either. It's not a choice whether a person had a gay gene or whether their environment made them gay. Either way, you know, at the end of the day, you know, they are gay. And because of that, it's inexcusable. There's no valid excuse for the discrimination that they are faced with as an organization because, as well, in addition to at least biologically speaking being male, and biologically speaking being heterosexual, as far as being attracted to women are concerned, one thing that I have that they don't is, for instance, because if I had a normal relationship, if I were not in a polyamorous relationship like I am, and my employer were to find out about that, it wouldn't be a big deal. If I were employed by somebody, however, and they were to find out, I do not have legal protection shielding me from being fired. And as I've discovered, when I was celebratory of the gay community, ultimately getting the right to marriage for themselves, I didn't realize that there was so much further to go, and I have unintentionally upset gay people in the past, because I was naive. I wasn't aware of the full extent of what was affecting them as a community. But that was a failure as an ally of the gay community that I went through in my past. I mean, it was a learning experience. I was genuinely trying to do the best job that I could possibly do to stand up for gay rights. So that I find I haven't said anything about any of this because my tendency has been to tune out. I mean, like, I haven't been paying attention really to what's been going on with Crowder and this. So, actually, responding to the Vox, articles and the things that had been said about him, because Crowder has a newfound sense of relevancy to me because all these people are basically telling us over at TYT, ultimately that Crowder has surpassed us in view count and surpassed us and all that. All I have to say to all that is that tough shit, man. Crowder is a piece of shit. Like, this is like, for all the things that he said about him, and these more like, Crowder tries to spin it off like Crowder's a comedian. This is pretentious. Like, Crowder, I have to say, if you are ultimately a comedian, you suck at comedy. I would heckle you, really, for real, because you are like one of the most painfully unfunny people, and you think that that was a playful ribbing. calling him a lispy queer, an angry little queer, and a gay Mexican. I'm not laughing. This wasn't funny. Like, just flat, not funny. You are not funny, Crowder. You might think you are funny, and there may be some people that are laughing at your jokes, but they're not funny. So, and I'm just being candid with you about this. You are like, if you want to see funny, look at David Cross videos.